hello. Okay, Mala, I want to welcome everyone to this event for Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. It's really nice having the Human Rights Directorate here with us. It's very, very important that we work together, both institutions and also working with youth to create a positive difference in university. Today we'll be talking a little bit about the National Action Plan Against Racism, which will take all of us to succeed, as we will hear more from one of our speakers. I must start by introducing myself, I think. I'm Michael Spiteri. I am the Policy Officer for KSU for this year. This is an initiative which I think is brilliant, and I think that KSU should do more with this regard. And I really hope that we get some interesting perspectives here today. I must start by saying that with respect to this conversation, I find myself in an extremely privileged position of never having experienced racism personally. But I think this makes it all the more important for people like me to listen to this conversation and to try and be part of this solution, educate ourselves. I look forward to listening and learning from our panel, who, while young, like myself, are doing their part to make this country more welcoming. Let's be inspired by each other to do our part, small or large, to make this country a little bit of a better place for all of us. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Alex from the Human Rights Directorate, and he'll be talking to us about the National Action Plan.
Thank you, Michael, for that very interesting introduction. I think you basically really set the scene well for something that is very exciting about being here on campus. You said we were young. I'm not that young, but I'm young at heart. And I cherish very much the opportunity to be here. Thank you for this collaboration. I cherish the opportunity to be here to reflect on what needs you're not the future, you're today, you know. This is like we talk about children. No, it's not. They're not tomorrow's adults. You're not tomorrow's policymakers. You're today, and together with those of us in the field, we each have a role to play. So, as you said, I'm going to talk a bit about this thing called the National Action Plan Against Racism. Okay, it's a bit of a fancy name for something which is maybe when I was trying to explain what it's about, I think the question that came to my mind was, where do you start from with an issue like racism and xenophobia? Where do you start from? The risk, obviously, is that the challenge is so great that you might feel that it's a bit hopeless and you start nowhere. You never start anywhere. And obviously that's very dangerous. The risk of hopelessness, of feeling that nothing can be done. And an organization like ours, the Human Rights Directorate, one of the jobs that we've been given to do is to function in Malta as the entity which draws up this thing called the National Action Plan Against Racism. So basically, what is this? This is a set of measures, of concrete measures, of things to do, of activities like this, the Anti-Racism and Diversity Week, okay? And basically coordinating them. Coordinating this thing, you know, various measures, various initiatives, various projects, and making sure that in this case, in the 5 years to come, the current strategy runs from 2025 till 2030 to make sure that these are done, you know. And how do these measures and these initiatives and these projects come about? Where did we get these measures from? They come from discussions, experience with racialized groups, with victims, with NGOs, with other government agencies, with the EU, okay? Because even in the EU, there's a, let's say, a EU-wide National Action Plan Against Racism. Kombinazzjoni last week we were presenting ours, the Maltese one in Brussels. So, not to take up too much of your time, I'm going to go through these. Let's say there are 10 main areas of intervention, okay, in this plan, which make it in a way a whole of society. We try to target everyone. Everyone has a role, because racism is something that if we don't tackle it, it takes us all down together. So the first one is the first set of measures are concerned with legislation and policy reform. Okay? So obviously we need to have good laws. One of the big problems of racism is hate speech. Okay, as you know, hate speech needs to be tackled primarily through prevention, but when that doesn't work, we need to make sure that we have legislation that is enforced, so that we send across the message that in Malta and Gozo and across the EU and globally, there is zero tolerance for hate speech. We can disagree even very strongly about hot topics like migration, like population and all these things. Doesn't matter. You know, we can have different views as long as we express them in a democratic way, in a tolerant way. But if we cross that line of hate speech, then we need the law. The second area of intervention is, we're calling it anti-racism governance. So basically, governance means how are we running this sector? How is it operating? How is it being managed? And in this, the different ministries, agencies have a big role to play. So we make sure that we get not just the Human Rights Directorate, which is the coordinator of all this, but even all the other ministries that provide services, for example, to the population. No? If somebody goes to a social security department, to a hospital, to a school, to wherever, you know, and what type of attitude is there going to be towards the diversity in our society? As you know, nearly 30% of our population, of people residing in Malta today, is not of Maltese nationality. So the chance that anybody working in a public service meeting a person not of Maltese nationality is sky high at this point. And obviously at that point of meeting a public service, any form of discrimination is absolutely not to be tolerated. So we need to make sure that entities have training, resources, procedures to deal with this diversity. The third point of the National Action Plan Against Racism I already mentioned is hate speech and hate crime. Let me say something quickly about hate crime. Because if unchecked, if we don't intervene on hate speech, the risk is that it could pass on to a hate crime. So from words passing on to action. And that's why it's so important not only to address hate speech, because it is illegal and bad in itself, but because also of the risk that the speech turns into an action. And obviously there we need again a whole set of education and prevention, especially online. No? And obviously here in the context of university with mostly the younger generations, where technology is really part of daily life, you and our children, you know. This is particularly important. And one of the measures, for example, that we're working on, which is about to start up, is a working group together with the Department of AI here in university on racial hatred on AI. it's a problem, but we want to make sure that that AI also becomes part of the solution. All right? This is really important, I think, for us to be positive. You know, we cannot fight and as though this doesn't exist. We need to make it part of the solution. I'll go quickly to the other things. The fourth pillar of action is training. Training for police, prosecutors, judiciary, teachers, public servants. Okay, training across the board for everyone. Everybody needs more training. The moment, I think, nowadays, with a world that changed so fast, if you say that you don't need training, you know, it's a problem, and the risk is that we can become irrelevant. Okay, representation. So this week, for example, the Anti-Racism and Diversity Week is one of the measures in this National Action Plan to make sure that I think you said this, Michael, no? We're privileged, no? An adult white male, but I don't belong to a minority, you know, but we need to make sure that we meet the people who belong to so-called minorities in our society, hear them, hear their concerns, and understand that they belong to Maltese and Gozitan society just as much as I do. You know, they have all the rights and all the responsibilities that we have. Full stop. There are no ifs, no buts, no conditions to it. You know, it is just, it's just the way it is. And we need to live with that. Structural racism, okay, so the racism that could exist in structures that prevent people from achieving their full potential because of a hidden hand, okay, which is not so hidden after all. This exists in most areas of discrimination. Memx tamel, you know, there's nothing we can do. That's the way it is, you know. You can only get till here, you know. You can't advance anymore. We don't want too much diversity here. We want things to remain as they were. These are things that we hear, you know. You can't pin them down very easily, but they're there. And you know that they're there when especially members of our racialized groups, communities, when members of so-called minorities try to achieve the same rights that others have. Finally, very quickly, specific forms of racism. Okay, in this action plan, we're mentioning specifically as problems that we need to keep our eyes on: anti-Muslim hatred, anti-Semitism, people of African descent, Roma. We don't have a Roma community in Malta, but for all we know, there might be individuals who, at this point in time, are being discriminated against because of their ethnic identity, and anti-Asian discrimination. Okay, we all know these forms. We hear them, we see them. We know the language that's said about these groups online and the stereotypes. Intersectionality. So you could have a person who's a Muslim and a member of the LGBTIQ community. So the discrimination, the problem there is twofold, because you can get discriminated twice over, and it becomes almost a new form of discrimination. Research, okay, here we are in a place where research is important, and it gets. How are we going to get to know more about the situation, the real situation in Malta and Gozo? Through research, to understanding, to making sure that we know the facts. There's so much rumors, so many conspiracy theories out there. Through scientific research, we get to know the facts. And finally, and I'll leave it at that, monitoring and evaluation. A plan like this needs to be monitored, it needs to be evaluated to make sure that the targets, the deadlines, the deliverables, the outputs that we said that we're going to do have been done. For example, we said every year we're going to hold the Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. Sometime down the line, somebody will ask us, was this held? Yes, we can get you people to we have photos, we have evidence that this was held. Okay, so this is all from me at this point. Very happy to take questions. Thank you once again for the invite.
So thank you so much, Alex. Yes, deserves a round of applause, as does the whole team at the HRD. There's a lot to unpack here. You spelled it out beautifully for us. But something which really came across to me is that, like, with such a big problem, this cannot be solved just by one institution or one person alone. I feel or I got this impression that it is the small actions by the many good people in Malta which can really make the difference here. And this plan is there just to give us a template of what each of us can do, which is very, very important, because when you feel hopeless, most of the time is that you just don't know what to do first and how to act. So this can help give us, give Malta that very, very important plan to move forward with this regard. Speaking of people, you mentioned it, that sometimes you feel hopeless. Another important part of that is being inspired to act. And I am inspired every day by the people who I work alongside, and I am lucky enough to know these 4 individuals who are beside me right here. I'm going to try my best to give you an introduction, but I think they deserve a little bit of a round of applause to get started. What do you think? So, first one is Francesca Giudice. She is a youth political activist and a Master of Advocacy student with a very strong interest in human rights law, particularly equality and non-discrimination. She serves as the national officer within the Maltese National Youth Council, KNZ, and has also represented Maltese youth at an international level, including as a member of the European Commission President's Youth Advisory Board, and formerly as Malta's youth delegate to the Council of Europe Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. Her experience in human rights law is grounded in both academic research through her LLB dissertation on SOGIGESC-based discrimination. I apologize, I couldn't spell it out as a word, and practical work within the legal unit of the Human Rights Directorate. So, right by her side is Riddim Garg, who is a 6th form student and a youth activist passionate about the intersection of space and climate. She is an ambassador for Girls Go STEM, an initiative by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and also serves as the director for the environment within the same Malta National Youth Council. A vocal advocate for diversity and equality, she has spoken at the Women and Girls in STEM Forum 2024 and also led workshops in AI, gender and racial bias at such a young age. Bianca Pac is a human rights and organizational development coordinator at the European Student Union and is in the final year of her Bachelor of Laws degree at the University of Malta. Passionate about student representation, Bianca has spent the past 3 years actively shaping the student movement, first on a national level through KSU, and now internationally within ESU. Her experience also extends to the CEU Alliance Student Council, and she previously served as a member of the ESU board. Bianca's work is driven by her commitment to human rights, solidarity, equity, and welfare in education, values that continue to guide her advocacy and work within the European student community. And last but not least, Afnan Gwina, currently pursuing a master's degree in humanitarian action, serving as the Vice President of Friends of MSF, which is Doctors Without Borders, and as the Vice Chair of the Committee on Race and Ethnic Affairs. Thank you all for joining me. We have some interesting questions to go through. So, to get things started off, throughout your role, this is open for everyone, so we can go maybe from Francesca going this way. Throughout your role, how do you support students when faced with discrimination or anti-racist narratives?
Firstly, thank you very much for the invite. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to speak on such an important subject. Firstly, as the Maltese National Youth Council, we basically represent all youth in Malta. So it's not only limited to students at the university, but students at other educational institutions, maybe youth who have not chosen to pursue education, but rather work elsewhere. Any youth, basically, we represent. What we try to do to support youth who maybe face racism, etc., is every single event that we do is as inclusive as possible, as open as possible to as many people. Our aim is always to give a voice to young people, and no matter who that person is, and no matter what issue they want to bring forward, including obviously these issues of racism, promoting diversity and so on, that's always our aim. I think one of the ways that we do this best is during our Pride events, which happen annually, where we take a very intersectional approach, where we always promote not only Maltese LGBTIQ+, but also migrant LGBTIQ+. In fact, we did a lot of promotion last year regarding migrant LGBTIQ+, and their situation in Malta. So yes, I think that's the main way we try to make everything inclusive as possible.
First of all, thank you for having me here as well. I think Francesca said it beautifully. As KNZ, of course, we try to make our events as diverse as possible. I mean, even as KNZ itself, we're always open to people coming up to us if anyone is facing any issues regarding discrimination. I mean, we're always here to listen, and we try to help out as best we can. Also, on a personal level, now, as me personally, as Rhythm, I try to raise awareness in the ways that I can by speaking to the ones that are close to me, my friends, my family, but also, for instance, I'm very passionate about racial bias in AI systems, so I try a lot to raise awareness about that, about how biased data, that ultimately humans make data that feeds into AI, and that data reflects the stereotypes that society is also plagued with for so many years and hopefully will not remain plagued with in the near future, but that same bias is reflected in AI systems. So I think in a world that is moving so fast technologically, it's very important that we make sure that as a society we move forward with each and every one of our members and we don't leave any single member behind. So that's how I try to make a difference.
Thank you, Michael. As a member on ESU, I feel like I've seen a huge jump on how we are able to tackle anti-racism issues on a national level as opposed to European-wide. And I think in the past 6 months that I've been in this role, it's really opened my eyes as to how broad and how much more expansive the issue is. And as my role as human rights coordinator, I feel that most of the work has actually been about awareness on the topic rather than actually targeting the problem itself, purely because, you know, in such a pluralistic society, we represent over 20 million students. It's such a broad scale of people. So I think from our end, it's much more on promoting awareness for different groups. For instance, today, actually right after this talk, we have a seminar on actually students in Ukraine and in Belarus currently and how they are dealing with problems of war. So it's more on an awareness and an inclusivity kind of perspective that we try to work. And then from there we kind of put feelers out into anti-racism, into LGBTQIA+ issues and discrimination on a broad variety of sectors. But yeah, I would say that's how we do it.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to everyone here. As a vice president of Friends of MSF and then a vice president of the Committee of Ethnic and Racial Affairs, not only this, but as previously 2 years of working as MIRSA financial officer, I think I've encountered, not personally, but through other students, many forms of racism that starts with something as small as our jokes. Students were in a space where someone was jokingly throwing racist statement towards them. And as Myron, I will maybe speak more about MIRSA, we try to make our space as inclusive as possible, and not only inclusive but safe, because I think safety is very crucial. I'm gonna talk about specific event maybe. Last year, Valentine event, Love Day. You can see different forms of love that society don't accept, and Mr. Alex here talked about one of them, briefly, intersectionality. We've met students who are Catholic, very dedicated Catholic and gay, or Muslim and gay, or any other two different identities in one person. We gave students a space to talk. Like we had an event, a case cucumber room, where students just came in a circle and just spoke about those experiences and how they tackled them, and they actually did very well through community. So community can be such a, like, it can have such a big role in solving this problem. So it's an individualistic, but it can be solved through community, I would say, and through student organization collaborating, from like small events to big like this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree, and you made some very, very important points. One of them is definitely to be intentional about how we plan our events. Sometimes, especially for youths, it is very difficult with limited resources to plan events, with balancing our studies, etc. But as student leaders, it is part of our role, and a very important part of our role, that we make sure that every event has a space for everyone. And also living that out in our day-to-day lives as well. If we want to be good role models, like you said, we have to raise awareness. Like you said, we have to make sure that we understand intersectionality. These are all very, very important things to live on our day-to-day life. So well done. Another question. So, racism and xenophobia can manifest through a wide range of experiences, often intersecting with other forms of discrimination. Which forms of racism, such as anti-black racism, anti-Muslim racism, anti-migrant racism, do you feel are most misunderstood or remain largely invisible within our society?
So, as of recent, I would say, especially, I wouldn't say it's really invisible, to be honest. It is, in Malta specifically, anti-migrant racism is a massive issue. And I noticed that it's a massive issue when even the people I surround myself with, maybe I start to see, it's obviously not overt racism, but it is, I guess, given recently a certain influx of migrants that have been brought into Malta, obviously led to an unprecedented rise in our population, which I think a lot of people think Maltese infrastructure is not able to handle, unfortunately. And people try to look for something to blame, I would say. And unfortunately, I really, really think that it leads to a lot of anti-migrant bias. Always, oh, it's their fault. Oh, this bus is full. It's because of these people who came in, you know, and then obviously they never directed to Maltese people. It's really unfortunate, especially when you see it in people who you're surrounded with and maybe who are quite progressive but still have these ideas. My opinion, that's what right now we're facing the most in Malta, I would say.
In my opinion, I'd also say that, as Francesca said, with the influx of migrants, anti-migrant racism is on the rise, though as someone who has been living here for a very long time, it's on the rise, but I do see that some element of it has always been there. And I mean, it may not be obvious. I mean, in some spheres it is definitely obvious, but for example, taking the school perspective of it, I see that racism in the unwillingness to talk to someone of a different background. I see it in the people from a different background ending up having to do group work on their own, for instance. It's such a tiny thing, but to that person it makes such a huge difference. And I just see it, as Afnan also mentioned, in the tiny jokes, the jokes that seem so harmless, they've become so normalized, but they're not. And a joke is not something that is funny when it's at someone's expense. And I feel like it's really, I mean, it's on the rise and it needs to be countered, because these tiny things, and we don't realize so many times, especially when it's not you that it's affecting, you don't realize it, but those people that are being targeted, they do realize it, and it affects every single aspect of their lives.
I fully agree with what all of you have said. Maybe one small thing I would add is that, in a sense, I agree that it is not invisible, but what is actually invisible is the fact that it feels almost, it doesn't feel wrong when, you know, you come across these unfortunate scenarios, the jokes, you know, singling out in group works and whatnot. I feel like we've come to a point, and I mean it starts from us, it starts from the grassroots, for us to really point it out. And I think that is, I would say, the big problem with racism issues currently in our country, that it just seems to pass us by with no sense of alarm whatsoever.
Thank you all. I think I don't have a terminology for what I'm gonna say, and I have 3 categories, okay, or maybe 2. So first of all, the first one that I saw first-handed, I didn't experience again, but I saw people who are like half Maltese, half another nationality. So like he's half, like the father or mother is Maltese, and like the other like side of the family is, I don't know, Libyan, Asian, whatever. They experience a huge amount of racism until this moment, and I tried to like even go through it academically and to just and psychologically to understand it. I've never understood it. Like he or she or they speaks perfect Maltese. They're part of the society 100%. Yet because of their color, the shape of their hair, or eyes, or whatever, they encounter a huge like amount of racism. Again, I didn't encounter that amount of racism, and I'm a foreigner. Those half Maltese encountered double the amount that I personally encountered. Second of all, and I think that's very, very invisible, anti-Semitism. I didn't see it, I just saw it a few months ago. Now I think I personally didn't handle the whole thing well. Like a classmate of mine is Jewish, and she encountered anti-Semitism from another classmate who's Maltese. Honestly, like I'm just gonna face my mistake as well. I saw the backlash, but I did nothing. I was just, you know what, it's a joke. He was joking. He didn't mean any harm by what he did. And apparently no, like the impact on her, like first of all, she didn't feel safe being in class and being specifically in the presence of him. And second of all, like when she came and like talked with students, I think we had such a massive response to her concern. Like eventually we went and like we spoke with authorities, but in the beginning we were just like, he's just making a joke, you know, like he doesn't mean any harm by it. And the third one, I'm gonna put an emphasis on intersectionality. Double identities like face a huge amount of racism as well. I don't understand it either, but I think we should put an emphasis on it because it's really sometimes not seen or not considered part of racism.
I completely agree. I think very, very, very important. We must make sure that we don't accept something just because it's culture, you know, like that is the most dangerous form, because then once there is that acceptance by society, really and truly it becomes that much more difficult for the organized response against it. There obviously are bad actors, but the worst part is when someone doesn't even know or doesn't even understand the real impact of their actions. Another, which brings us to, I think, a very, very important point, which is the online culture. So I would like to ask you all, with the increasing use of social media and digital platforms amongst young people, online hate speech has become a growing concern. How do you see technology shaping new or intensified forms of racist and xenophobic hate speech amongst youth?
I think this aspect of it is probably the most terrifying right now. And I think it's the one that policy leaders, legislation, whatever, is trying to deal with most, but it's in a bit of a how do we tackle this, because it's so massive. Firstly, I think this is an issue for anything, is not only this issue. It's that social media works based on algorithms. And algorithms, so you like one thing and it will keep giving you the same opinion over and over and over again. And what happens is that you end up in this echo chamber of opinions, which obviously, like, if you agreed with the first one, then it will keep reinforcing your opinion without giving you anything that contradicts it. It's very completely ruins like critical thinking and trying to form your own opinion, because you're constantly bombarded with the same opinion. And I think that is terrifying because unless you have very good digital literacy skills, it's difficult to avoid it, considering that algorithms have become so unbelievably strong. What also, like, multiple people mentioned, and even Alex mentioned, that the Human Rights Directorate is focusing on racial bias in AI. And I found it really interesting, kind of while preparing for this talk. I realized over the past few weeks that a lot of the more recent AI-generated content is unbelievably racially biased. It is always a, I guess, darker character who is always the perpetrator, I guess, always against a whiter, maybe lighter character that is either the victim or the hero. And I found it insane that even here it's so obvious, and it's also terrifying because this is the AI that people are currently using so much and relying on so much to do their work, and so many people are even forming their opinions off of what is given by this AI. And so I think that is terrifying. With regards to what youth organizations can do, I think it's, once again, so difficult in the face of what a massive problem this is to think about what you can do. But in my opinion, firstly, it's really important to create counter-narratives on social media, to speak up, because even if the less controversial opinion doesn't get as much attraction, it needs to be there, it needs to be available, people need to be able to compare both opinions and see that, like, it's not just this one opinion that exists and everyone has this opinion. That and teaching digital literacy, I think, is unbelievably important, because if everyone has digital literacy skills, they can slowly navigate, okay, like, I can tell that this is not everyone's opinion, it's just the algorithm is constantly giving me the same things and I should personally research both sides before I make my opinion. I think those two things are, like, very important.
I think, as Francesca mentioned, algorithms themselves, they're structured in such a way as to generate views. But even if you're someone who, does not hold discriminatory perspectives, outlooks, you're not someone who the algorithm would necessarily put into an echo chamber of racist content. It's still just the way, for instance, I mean, nowadays, most of us use social media for the news. The algorithm is built in such a way that even under any news that even remotely touches upon racist or just diverse topics, the comments, for instance, if you just open the comments, it would be in such a way that the comments that most push this racist narrative would always feature on top. And this negativity, when you see it constantly on every single post, everywhere, it makes you think that this is the reality. Again, an echo chamber, but it also suppresses your own views. Like, if you, for example, hold views that go against this, you would start thinking that you're the only one that does so, and it becomes so normalized, and it seems normal to us, and that also then infiltrates into our everyday life, where we think that, oh, these offhand remarks and just blaming a particular racial group for some things is normal. And then another thing is that I think just as human beings, the way we are structured, I mean, it's according to the information theory, anything that's not normal is something that we'll pay attention to more. So, for instance, if we see a negative news story about someone of a particular racial descent, and we see a similar story for someone with a descent that is local, we tend to focus more on the one that is about someone from a different descent. And we, even subconsciously sometimes, we tend to then start characterizing that group of people, associating that group of people with that type of news story. And it just keeps on pushing that narrative, and just it infiltrates into every aspect of our society as well. So I think that's why social media is so incredibly harmful. And also the fact that even people who hold racist views, it's so much easier to forget that there is someone behind that screen. It's so much easier to type that racist comment, to spread that narrative, because we forget that the other person has feelings. We forget that, I mean, we just think that we're behind this wall and we're safe and no one can get to us and our actions don't have consequences. But they do carry consequences, and we're seeing these consequences so much in today's society.
By the time the question comes to me, you guys have basically formulated all my thoughts. But no, maybe a couple of things I can add. I mean, I again completely agree. I mean, again, I am lucky enough to say that I come from a place of privilege where I don't actually face these kinds of issues myself, but and I mean this goes beyond racism and xenophobia. The media pushes such dangerous views on anything, and I think from an advocacy point of view, and I mean all of us are in that line of work, it's very, very easy for a very simple message to go askew. And so in reality, I from my perspective, I would say all we can do to combat this lack of digital literacy, this lack of portraying the right image and a more inclusive space is purely awareness. And the only way that we can kind of adapt to this kind of progression that media is taking is purely by being more aware of what is around us and of the different streams that people take, the different ideologies, and then, as one does for everything else, ultimately is make up your own opinion. Because if we were to purely depend on the media, it's very, very, very dangerous.
They said it beautifully. I don't know what to add. But yeah, definitely I agree with the three of you. I think definitely if you don't have enough education or digital literacy and awareness, you will fall into the narrative and it will shape you no matter how much. And that's quite dangerous, because I think that's where societies here and even abroad are heading towards. We're going to be shaped by news outlet or meme page that just keeps spreading hate, and that's it, to be honest.
No, I agree, and I really, really like the idea of the counter-narrative which Francesca mentioned. I think that is something which we can all do at home in our own time. If you see something that in person you would not accept, then you have to speak out. You have to speak out, you have to be there as well, so that once someone else is looking at there and they're feeling that despair, that maybe this is the majority opinion, like Rhythm said, you're not alone. There is someone else who's speaking the thing which you think is the right thing to do. I think that's very, very, very powerful. We can go through these questions a bit more quickly. There are more targeted questions here. So maybe for Bianca, in what ways can academic staff and university leadership move beyond awareness raising and embed anti-racism more concretely into curricula, research and everyday decision making?
So maybe it's a bit of a background. Currently, in ESU, we are working on an anti-racism strategy, both internally and also for external use with stakeholders, and also to push onto European higher education institutions. And basically, I would say from our end, it starts with training. It starts with going beyond just the knowledge and actually applying it, putting it in the field, putting it into practice, and really giving it that practical element that I go against what I said previously. Going beyond just the awareness point, but actually seeing it done and seeing it done with results. From our point of view, that is basically the biggest advocacy point that we're pushing for. Even now that the new anti-racism strategy has been published by the European Parliament, by the Commission. So I think from our end, I would say that is the biggest point we're pushing on, training and teaching people how to adapt to new circumstances. I mean, I think Malta has a very unique population in a way that we are constantly adapting, and as you guys mentioned, migration patterns and the increase of migration population has grown so much in the past few years that practices that were relevant maybe 10 years ago are not as relevant nowadays, just because of how fluctuating the situation is. So I think we are in a very unique position where we need to constantly, be on the lookout for teaching people new things, teaching people how to adapt. And I think that is really the most important thing which will then lead to implementation and research in study units. It all starts from ingraining it into people, basically.
I agree. And ESU does a really good job with this. You're looking at millions of people in Europe, and especially hundreds of thousands of students, and coordinating this response is obviously very, very, very big. Taking it maybe a bit more local, to a question for Afnan. What is the role of the Committee on Race and Ethnic Affairs within university setting, and what kind of support do the committee offer to students and perhaps university staff when faced with racism?
So the committee basically is based on 3 pillars, if I can say. First of all is awareness, second is accessibility and integration, and then enforcement and safeguard. So for awareness, we start with not only students but staff as well. We promote awareness, and we try to put an emphasis on what's going on a university campus, like what type of discrimination or racial prejudice is here on our campus and in our classes, or even, you know, in the admin offices. So that's something we focus on. Then we go to accessibility, make sure that students and staff have the accessibility to documents or training, or, you know, even like learning how to not discriminate someone. You know, you can just use the wrong pronoun with someone who doesn't identify with this, and I genuinely don't understand that. I don't understand many things, but that's one of it. Why you have an issue with using a different pronoun with someone? Like, you're gonna make them happy, you're not gonna die, like, whatever. But we make like we have a document. I'm sorry that I'm shifting, but we have a document on the committee on the website of the university in the committee section about using the proper, like, an inclusive language. I think that's something worth giving it a look. It's on the Committee of Ethnic and Racial Affairs. Give it a look. It's a long document, but, you know, it's helpful and might help you. And then we go to enforcement. So basically, we're going beyond disciplinary procedure. We're trying to, like, go, like, to a student level, you know, like, and not only student, but even like director. Some of the cases are reported to director himself and to more specialized members in order to help students or staff.
I was myself on this committee like 2 years ago, so I had some personal experience, and I know how dedicated the people in there are, and how much they listen to the student as well. For example, they give the vice chair position to a student, so that there really is both the staff and the student perspective there. And I think lessons from university should not be confined just to the lectures, but also, like this document that you are saying, etc., can still teach us a lot about how to create a safe space for people. And I would recommend as well that people take a look at it and learn from it as well. After all, it is made by experts in the field, so really knowledgeable people. As a final question, maybe something to leave the audience with, maybe we can all go through a little bit some of the projects and initiatives that you have been part of, or I know that we've spoken a little bit about them, but...
Well, regarding particular initiatives, the KNZ is... Well, regarding particular initiatives, KNZ is always obviously working on putting more awareness out there, on encouraging more awareness. But I think initiatives also come from us ourselves. Like, we are the ones that need to take initiative. We are the ones that need to take that step and try to get to know that person who perhaps is from a different culture from us. We are the ones that need to also put in effort from our side, because we are the ones that create an inclusive society. And on this, I also wanted to touch a bit, I know it's not very online with the question, but on the culture aspect of it, that when we see a different the point of eliminating racism is not to make everyone the same. It's to actually embrace different cultures that are there. And that is why I think we all need to think a bit more about how beautiful it is that we have different cultures, and we need to put in that effort to get to know the different cultures that they are, to learn the good things about them, to share the good things about our own cultures. And that is what ultimately creates a more diverse society, and definitely awareness is a huge, huge element of it. And that is why I think the main emphasis when we talk about initiatives needs to be on awareness and actual effort that comes from each and every one of us.
Fully agree. I think what especially these organizations can do, I feel like we've mentioned intersectionality a lot, but I feel like it's so important that it's not simply diversity as a standalone topic. It is diversity as we are implementing it constantly within everything we do. So even I think youth organizations should always focus on, whenever organizing an event or talking about a particular subject, always making sure that diversity is intrinsic within that subject, finding out how diversity is a structural and like permanent thing rather than just a one-off conversation that we have on its own without linking it to other things that we do. I think on a personal level, like we've already mentioned, considering the fact that we've all agreed that something that we encounter a lot and the way that we encounter racism in our lives is through like jokes and one-off remarks which we think, we can't do anything about that because if we tell them to stop, we're going to come off as like, you can't take a joke. Like, I think that mentality really, we need to do away with that mentality and really call out, like Michael had said previously, call out every single thing that we see, both in person and online, constantly create counter-narratives and just make sure that that behavior is not accepted at all, in all instances.
From an ESU perspective, going beyond what I mentioned previously on anti-racism and literally jumping off exactly what you've just said, intersectionality is so important, so much so that from our end we actually have equity, diversity, inclusion strategies and actually statutory points in our documents which state specific things that we have to do in all our statutory events. So, for example, in our board meetings, in our European student conventions, we always have to have a certain set of criteria which have to be satisfied, including having a trusted persons team, which creates a safe space where if anyone feels that they are being discriminated against, if anyone feels uncomfortable or unsafe, that they have the opportunity to come and speak to certain people to resolve these issues. There are always accessibility requirements. There are always things which are specifically set out to continue to create a more inclusive space and a more a safer space, basically, for all these different students from all their different backgrounds, to foster a safer and a more inclusive environment where we are able to discuss freely and more comfortably about education, which is ultimately, I think, a common goal for all of us.
So I think from an organizational level, I'm going to talk about Friends of MSF. Last November we had an event called Friendsgiving, basically another version of Thanksgiving, where it was open to all cultures, all nationalities to bring a dish, talk a bit about it and the significance of the dish, and present it to whoever came. I think it was an amazing event to promote diversity within campus and to show others how it looks like and maybe how it tastes as well. Maybe that's how it starts, with tasting our different cultures and see how beautiful they are and how we can put them within our life. On the committee level, not gonna lie to you, I have few projects that I've heard about from the chair of the committee, Dr. Omar, and I think one of them is having prayer room for different religions that is taking part on that side of the university. I think it's gonna be soon available to students from different religious background to use it and to practice their faith freely.
So there's the counter narrative for all of you. It's really fighting hate with hope and with love and with our cultures, like the beauty of our diversity. If I think our message is much stronger and much more appealing at the end of the day. We just have to be there to to actually send it out. No, I learned a real lot from all of you, and I thank you all for your contributions. I open it up to our audience if you guys have any questions.
Thank you very much. So, firstly, thank you all very much for the insight and perspectives you've all provided. It's clear you all come from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, which I think informs the content of my coming question. One of the objectives of the Anti-Racism and Diversity Week is to raise awareness about different initiatives and different problems facing diversity. I do not believe that the statement racism is corrosive and detrimental to society and individuals is a controversial one. What is an area of policy or behavior that you've all noticed that you believe requires more awareness and more attention when it comes to addressing it?
Okay, I'm going to be very specific on a specific area of policy. Basically, as a background, as Michael previously mentioned, I wrote my dissertation on subject-based discrimination, subject being sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, and gender characteristics, I think. And basically, the point of my dissertation was to understand what area of LGBTIQ plus discrimination is the worst in Malta. And what I actually found was, once again going back to intersectionality, what we said earlier, was LGBTIQ migrants is such a big issue in Malta, and that's where I link it obviously to the topic of this talk. Where basically legally they are entitled to so few rights, especially when it comes to legally transitioning, gender surgery and stuff like that. And that was something that genuinely amazed me, because I was not aware of it before, how very few rights they're entitled to. Because we know that in Malta, LGBTIQ plus persons are entitled to quite a good standard compared to other countries. But when it comes to migrants, that standard falls horribly low. And so that is one area of policy which I've become particularly passionate about recently, when it comes to the intersectionality between race and LGBTIQ plus.
Well, for me, a bit away from the policy side, but still an area that I think requires so much more attention, is stereotyping. I think stereotypes are so incredibly harmful, and the saddest, the most horrifying part is that they often cause so many people to start suppressing their culture, to start being scared to express themselves. I mean, a very personal example, but I remember there was a time when I was very scared to share my food that came from my culture, to take it to school, to even... Because you're scared that you will get stereotyped, and you're scared that people will not receive your culture the way you hope they would. And I think that's why stereotyping, and it's so invisible, and it's so passive, and it's just so normalized. And it shouldn't be, it cannot be, and it's so detrimental. So that's definitely, I think, an area which requires so much more awareness, so much more attention.
I'll start by agreeing with you completely. I think most, unfortunately, issues that require change and that require more attention start way before we actually get to the policy level itself. But to answer your question, I would focus as well on migration and on migrants as a point, which requires more attention. Also because is part of my dissertation currently, and I've been going through more specifically on nationality laws and what requirements are basically needed for migrants and third country nationals to achieve and that nationality in Malta. And it is unfortunately very striking, and it's very unfortunate just how difficult it is for people who want to integrate into our culture, for people who want to be part of this pluralistic society. That there are so many barriers for them, which are so inherently laid out in our legislation and in our policy. So I would say more on migrants, migration policy.
I agree with the three of them. Maybe I'll put an emphasis on what Rhythm said about stereotypes, because I believe they affect even migration or migrants, like, or LGBTQ migrants, stereotypes. Black and gay, Muslim and lesbian. I don't know what. I think it's the stereotype that make you deep down believe that in their culture or in their religion, this thing is more than forbidden. It's punishable. And you forget that in your own, this thing is forbidden and punishable at a certain point of time. So I think we should definitely focus on stereotypes, and stereotypes that is spread through soft means like jokes or, I don't know, silly conversations that leads to huge harm. And yeah.
Okay, any other questions? We'll take two more and...
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for such interesting perspectives. I found this very, very interesting and learned a lot from each and every single one of you. You are very admirable and you have a long way ahead, so keep it up. So my question to you is, again, it's so inspiring to hear young people like yourselves on board this mission and fighting for this mission every day and non-stop. How do you suggest we can get more people on board this mission? Maybe you have some suggestions on this. Thank you.
Very good question.
Thank you for your question. I think a gathering like this is a start. I think maybe we should have more working group, more events in relation to this. I think many here at university would have a say in the matter, or at least experienced it, and from any perspective, you know. So I think more working groups, more similar initiatives or events can genuinely make youth come. And also, like, maybe to put in mind the time. Maybe if we did it midday, 12-ish, more people will be around in quad and will come. Or if it was in a closed area where it's a seminar. Or, you know what, as a student in the Department of IR, when we have a seminar or an event, it's compulsory for students to attend. So maybe we can make it compulsory for students to attend, because I'm sure they have a lot to say. Thank you.
You know, I fully agree with what Afnan said, and even from personal experiences, consultations are where you get most information out of people and where you get most valuable inputs. And I think it's all about making people feel like it is their place and they want to be heard. Because I think that is an issue, especially on such a sensitive topic, I feel, such as anti-racism and xenophobia, that people don't feel that it is their place or that their input is wanted. So I would start with consultations.
First of all, thank you for the question. I think it's a very important question, and I'd have two approaches, kind of, because I think racism often starts at a very young age, so from children basically. So I think even if the school pushed more towards kind of educating on different cultures, towards organizing events that's, you know, I mean, a lot of schools have people from different cultures, so even if they just organized events where they share about their cultures, I don't know, food, for example, local councils are also a very good means of this, whereby they can organize events also to integrate people of different origins into the community. And then, as Afnan and Bianca mentioned, on a more youth level, definitely more events, more awareness. And I think we need to stop kind of making this topic taboo or pretending like it doesn't exist. I think there definitely needs to be so much more conversation on this topic, because ultimately that's what leads to change. Thank you.
Firstly, I think every single person who's ever been in youth organizations has asked that question of how am I going to get young people to genuinely be interested in this, to engage with this, etc. I think that's something we ask with every single thing that we do. But what I think is important, firstly, what I have noticed, so I've been in youth activism for 4 years now. What I've noticed is that when you make an event more participatory, when it is maybe smaller, but they get the chance to speak as much as they would like, to completely they're not interrupted when they speak. I feel like a lot of youth are so annoyed when they go to a very structured event where they can only speak for a certain amount of time and they can't fully share their opinion. So when it is in a small setting where people can truly express themselves, the people who are truly passionate about the topic will come. Secondly, like, it's so important always to make it fun and to make it relatable, to always connect, like I said before, to always connect diversity to things that people do in their daily lives and they constantly do. I know that as part of the campaign this weekend there was a football match, I believe, and there were the stands in Valletta, which I think is like great ideas. Yes, I think those would be what I think of.
I know I'm only the moderator, but I really agree with Francesca. I mean, one of the events which I always remember from a youth perspective is one which was organized by Francesca a few months ago, which I attended. And it was about, in this case, local councils. I wasn't particularly interested about local councils, but because it was fun, because the recipe was just people enjoying themselves and in the meantime learning about something, I learned a lot through it because I was fully focused and fully participatory. So I agree a lot. All right, I think you had a question.
First of all, thank you for all discussion panel, and it's a very interesting discussion, and I'd like to focus on migrants in the Maltese community. So my question is, what are the challenges do you find intrinsic to the Maltese community that can or may prevent living together or reducing the racism in the Maltese community? And what are the potential solutions, if you can propose some?
Well, that is a very important question, I think. Definitely the barriers for people from a migrant background are, I mean, it starts, I think, online, definitely. As in when a migrant goes into a new country, they often look at the online situation of the country. So then when you see that racist narrative that's already been set, I think that definitely puts you off. And as well, I do think that just when you come from a different background, you already find it hard to kind of approach new people and integrate. But then when already the community that there exists in that place is slightly biased or stereotyped towards people from a migrant descent, that makes it so much harder. And I think to counter this, well, I do think everything starts from awareness. So just when people become more aware of cultures, but particularly to the problem of to the issue of migration, I think there needs to be just more awareness into the causes of migration, the benefits of migration, and then, of course, the actual cultures of the people, of different people, because, of course, migration is from all different cultures. And I think things that can help in this is, again, events like Afnan mentioned, where kind of you bring your own food, you bring your own culture, you share your stories. And I think that story sharing element is also really important because it makes people seem more human, and that is a very ironic statement because of course we're all human, but it's so easy to forget that people who are often migrants are human. So I think that makes them more relatable, more welcoming, but it also makes us feel as if, you know, we can relate to these people and we should relate to these people. Thank you.
First of all, obviously your question is a very big question, which I think many people try to answer. I completely agree with what Rhythm said. Maybe what I would like to say in addition is, firstly, I feel like the answer to so many questions is education, and always education. Everything that we said all links together, kind of. The fact that there are certain stereotypes and certain bias prevent people from allowing migrants the opportunity to integrate into their community, because there is a bias of, recently, for example, there's a bias of, a person came here and they're going to take my job, so I don't want to let them in, and into my life, into my community. So I think, firstly, education to break down those biases and those stereotypes is crucial. Without that, it's going to be really difficult for integration, for migrants to integrate into our community to happen naturally. And I think the event, like Afnan said, is like an amazing opportunity to get to better know migrants' background, understand their story, understand where they came from, and help you relate to them and their issues more. And I think that's super important for allowing the community to integrate properly and people to like mix and stuff like that. Yeah.
You didn't leave much for me to add. No, but I agree completely. And when you mentioned your question, the first word that came to my mind was education, and educating people from a young age. Like both of you mentioned, even in schools, having more talks and more inclusive discussions, I think is such an important thing to do. And the issue is that, I mean, I say that I come from a privileged perspective where I can see what other countries are doing and what other national student unions are organizing for children and youth across their countries. And there is hope, because it does happen in other countries where there are programs, there are strategies, there are opportunities to become more inclusive as a society and as a student body. So from my perspective, I would just hone in on education, and really that is the driving force for everything, I believe, at the end of the day.
Thank you for the question. I agree with the three of them, and they always like say everything correctly, beautifully. I think Francesca said it, or Redem, one of you. But she said that they stop immigrants from integrating in society with like the fear to take part of them. I think it also forbids you or takes from you the chance to get to know this person because of the fear. I think fear is such a thing embedded in our societies that make us reject everything new, like a new culture, whatever, anything new and something we're not familiar with. So I think fear took from many the opportunity to meet and understand that culture. I'm gonna say something, it might be a surprising thing for everyone, but I think I am very privileged because after 6 years here, I've never experienced racism from Maltese. The only form of racism that I've experienced was from European who are non-Maltese, or from people who are my kind and disagree with certain things I do, so they choose to like remind me that I'm foreigner. But I've never experienced Maltese, and I think that was mainly because I personally wasn't afraid to take part of their culture, and the people in my circle never were afraid to take part of mine. So I think that's a step as well, to stop being afraid and maybe more into learning about the other, and that goes vice versa, like me and you, both of us, getting to know each other and understanding what we don't understand. It's just one conversation away from, or even one Google search away from understanding the thing that you're not familiar with and the thing that you fear the most.
Okay, one last question.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the very fruitful discussion. You touched upon education, and we are at the University of Malta, a place where a lot of the research on numerous topics take place. Maybe just maybe you have a very quick answer to this, but what or how can we make use of research, firstly to bring out the negative elements, which you have touched upon quite a lot, but also to bring about the positive elements and change that needs to be undertaken to move forward?
Thank you for your question. I think we have a lot of good research here about racism. In my opinion, what's missing is the student element. You have last year we had a seminar about LGBTIQ migrants and LGBTIQ in general. All the research was done by professors here, and it was such a nice seminar, I've attended it. But what misses that seminar, I think, was a student perspective. Many students have good writing skills, good research skills, and I think if we just give them the opportunity, first of all, to examine how serious is the issue, and second, to write something about it. I think we might go forward with what you've said and with the research and with maybe solving the problem as well.
I 100% agree. And unfortunately, as you said, this distinct cutoff between administrative work and the student's perspective is something that unfortunately is not only felt purely on this topic, it is a European-wide feeling. And I fully agree. I mean, there are plenty people, plenty youth, plenty students who are so keen on the topic, so passionate, who want to work, but just cannot find the facilities to actually do so. So I think, I mean, even from our end, from all of our end, it's a matter of really pushing for more student engagement and widening the access and widening the facilities and opening more doors for students to be involved, because students want to be involved. We just tend to find a lot of closed doors in our faces on issues such as this, which are honestly such an untapped market, which can provide so much fruit and so much good research in the future.
Well, I think they've already said whatever the main points. I think there is more need for student-based research. But regarding the research itself, I do think that it would be very beneficial to actually research the misconceptions that exist around different cultures, the misconceptions that exist around migration, the racist narratives that there are, because you can only work to solve the issues when you know what the issues actually are. So I think it's very important to first of all pinpoint what people actually struggle with, what people think about different areas of this issue. So I think that is definitely something that's very needed.
I was actually going to say what Rhythm said, basically, which is like the point of education and the point of research would be especially to break down the biases and the stereotypes as much as possible that exist, to allow people to kind of open their minds up to, like, this isn't reality. Like, you know, the point of education is to really guide people to, like, hey, this is what's real. With these stereotypes and biases are only like made up, maybe societal, etc. Yes, I agree with everything else that was said.
Okay, so I want to say big thank you to everyone who participated. From our end, maybe some final thoughts, maybe even starting with Alex.
Thank you very much. It was really enjoyable to listen and to learn. As you said, very often the learning is the student and is the teacher, you know, just learning as we're learners throughout our life. Maybe just two very small points. One of them relates when you were talking about online. I remember something that inspires me a lot in terms of the activism and the policy making and the work we need to do, that what is illegal offline should become illegal online, and we need to work towards that, because the online reality is very present. The other thing is that it's true to a very large extent that racism and migration are tied up together. However, there's also racism is not just about migration. There are Maltese Muslims, Maltese Jews, Maltese black persons, first, second, third generation, you know, and so, you know, it's important to also embrace that and keep that in mind as a that we do find sometimes this problem when speaking about racism, that people think that we're just talking about migration. We're not. We're talking about that 30%, but also about the remaining 70%. It is us. Our society is diverse, and the more time passes, the more it's going to become diverse, not just with people who come and go and this and that. So thank you very much, and keep up the amazing work, all of you.
Firstly, I think I wanted to highlight again how important an initiative like this is to bring forward these like perspectives, and just this week as a whole, it's unbelievably important to raise dialogue about this issue. And thank you for thinking of youth to talk about this more, because we feel that youth often are left out of the conversation. So this is a very, very nice difference for us. I feel like we circled back around the same themes very often, but I think what I would like to end on and emphasize on is that, as we said, racism nowadays is becoming especially normalized through either online usage or through offhand jokes which we make in daily conversations and are taken as well. It's nothing serious. And I think it's so important, as we said, to constantly be the counter-narrative, to constantly stop that from being a normalized conversation and be the ones to I guess, change the conversation and change the perspective. Because if we don't do that first step, it's very difficult to continue advancing into, I guess, the ideal that we might want to seek. Yeah.
Well, I think they've already said a lot of the important points. To me, it's that I think so many of us think that we know all there is to know about different cultures. We know all there is to know about diversity. And I think it's really time to challenge those beliefs and to... I mean, diversity it's not just a check mark. It's not just that I know about this and my beliefs are set in stone. I think it's about getting to know other cultures, challenging your own education, your awareness. And in that, I think we're really lucky to be living in a multicultural society where we can actually get to know different people. And with that, I think I'd also say that it's really important that you approach that person that perhaps is a bit different from you, but the best case scenario is that you will gain a friend for life, and the worst case scenario is that you'll just talk to them once, but you have made their day better, and hopefully you've made your own day better. So I think that's really important, that you actually take that extra step. And lastly, please challenge that tiny joke, that offhand stereotype, because it's harmful and we cannot normalize it. And change starts from each and every one of us. And again, thank you to the Human Rights Directorate and KSU for this discussion, because I do think that youth play such a pivotal role in all of this and just enabling change as a whole. So thank you.
I'll just echo 2 sentences of what I said before. I, again, completely agree. But no, I truly believe that education is such an important stepping stone that we all need to take. And I mean, even personally speaking from my work now, as human rights coordinator, it is less of a me relaying information to other people, and it is more of just a constant learning curve, and learning more about different societies and learning more about different people and their backgrounds, and learning how to integrate further and how to create a more inclusive space. So I myself and I mean I implore everyone to take that step and to really dive into learning and discovering more, as Rhythm said, having those conversations, because I feel like every now and again when I feel that I come from a privileged position, you tend to forget that we live in a pluralistic society. We tend to forget that other people have different lived realities. So I truly think that education is just super, 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 super important.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to everyone here who asked and who participated and who listened to us. I'll echo everything they said. I'll maybe put an emphasis on the jokes. Be the one who doesn't take a joke. Be the annoying member of a family or a friend group or a classmate. Be that one. Take the extra step to challenge your fear and to understand something new. You genuinely don't know what that thing can open to you. Maybe a new friend, partner, or I don't know, someone who you cannot live without in the future. So once again, thank you all, and it was a privilege to be part of this. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's a brilliant and a really beautiful conversation that we had. Honestly, I wish there were more students, but that is only, I think it could only be a shame if we don't go home ourselves and we let this change our lives, you know? If we all do even something small today, we will be making a big difference in the lives of however many people that we can. So it all starts with us, and I was very, very happy to be part of this. So thank you all. Thank you. Thanks to the Human Rights Directorate once again. And have a good day.